Japanese food never has any vegetables.
So, hey everyone, this is my brother Ryan. We're currently live, by the way.
Okay.
Because I don't really have enough time to create another video during the time that he's here, I thought it'd be interesting if we made a video together.
Why don't you introduce me?
Okay, so this is my brother Ryan, and he's a year and a half older than me, and we kind of have... I would say that we have very different ways of kind of thinking and operating, and different skill sets and different interests. We can start with your occupation. So obviously I do YouTube. I'm a content creator. My brother, he's the CTO of a startup company in San Francisco, in Silicon Valley, called Cleary. Mm-hmm. And why don't you tell everyone what Cleary is about?
It's an internal tools productivity platform. So it's based off of software that
you might be out of frame.
Companies like like Twitter and Google and Uber and Airbnb, and they build tools for their employees to kind of just do day-to-day productivity stuff, finding information about the company in the office. So we're building tools similar to that so that every company can get access to those sorts of things.
Okay, yeah. So a good example, when I used to work at a university in Japan, it was very difficult for me to find the email address of someone else in the company.
Yeah.
And I imagine that that's kind of a problem for most companies. You can do it, but it takes time and it's kind of complicated more than it needs to be. So your company... The objective of your company is to address that kind of issue, that market, right?
We could do that.
That's one thing.
That's one very tiny thing. Who is this person that you're going to be meeting with, or what's the news and announcements that are happening at the company? You want to know what your benefits are. Any kind of wiki information that the company, they just accumulate lots of stuff, and it's really hard to find things.
Right.
We have a system that allows you to access information across all sorts of different platforms together with simple navigation tools.
Okay.
Something called
So I guess the golden question is, does your company use your software?
Yes, we do. We worked with Square. We built their internal platform, and Flexport. Those are two of the big ones that we've worked with.
Okay, cool. What's your favorite meal?
I actually don't think Japanese food is that good.
I actually think this would be really interesting to talk about.
Yeah.
Well, tell me why.
A lot of people really like Japanese food, but I'm not. I don't dislike it. I think it's fine, but I think Korean and Chinese and Vietnamese is all much better.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting. Can you kind of expand on that?
Japanese food never has any vegetables. It's always just rice and katsu. There's a piece of lettuce on the side.
Yeah, that's that's the traditional Teishoku style.
It's generally much blander. I think they focus more on purity of the thing, and you're it's rice and the one thing, katsu. Most people think Japanese food is the best of if you were stack ranking those cuisines. A lot of people would say Japanese food is the best. In 2009, my first time here, and I barely ate a vegetable the whole time. I know it's a contrarian view that I have compared to a lot of people.
Well, often those kind of views are the most interesting. Why don't you talk a little bit more about what you did immediately after graduating from Cornell?
Quickly got into startups and that kind of stuff. So on the side, I was building lots of startup companies with friends, just kind of as hobbies. And then I got into Chinese language because one of my friends moved to Beijing, and then I ended up moving to Beijing for a year and a half, and Korea for 4 months of that time too.
And why don't you say something in Chinese again, real quickly, so you can say I'm an American.
我是美国人.
I've heard many times in the past. I don't know anything about Chinese pronunciation, but everyone that I've heard that speaks Chinese that has heard my brother's pronunciation says that it's really good. So, when you studied Chinese, this might be interesting because most of the people that watch my channel are language learners. They are learning Japanese, and also because I teach pronunciation. Yeah. Did you ever learn Chinese in a classroom setting? I remember that you used to use a lot of tapes, in your car during your commute in the morning, so you were only exposed to native speech. Let me just take that.
Oh, sorry.
And one of the things that I like to teach is that it's kind of a controversial idea, but if you want to sound as native as possible, it's best not to put yourself in a classroom environment where 90% of the language, the foreign language that you're hearing, is foreigners speaking the language. Rather than that environment, it's best to just hear native speech. So is that the approach that you took?
Yeah, I think I learned Chinese. I have a very different experience than most people. Most people, I mean, it's probably similar to learning Japanese too, but most people learn it in more of a classroom setting, like you said. Like I remember, when we were in high school, it's like learning Spanish. Like there's like 30 people in the room, and like
no one really knows how to.
No one knows how to say anything, and the people that you're just speaking with someone else who doesn't know how to speak the language. So it's called kind of useless.
I don't know if I've actually talked about this before, but when you're in that classroom setting, oftentimes, and I actually think this is even more prevalent in Japan, this phenomenon of, despite you being very passionate about the language, there's almost a stigma about trying to sound as fluent as possible, like trying to speak with a very native-like accent. People will like look at you and kind of give you like the eye, like, man, look at this guy trying so hard.
Yeah.
Like it was certainly like that in Spanish in high school. Like if you gave anything more than the absolute minimal effort, people would just be like, man, get out of here. Like,
That's true.
And that's another reason why I think
that's just like that's because people, they don't want to be there, right? That's the difference. In a high school setting, you're only there because you have to be there.
Yeah, I think that's probably the main element, but I do think that there's an element of being watched by peers, even if everyone is quite passionate about the language. There's still a little bit of like, like you don't want to disrupt the flow, so to speak. So even when I was studying Japanese in Keio University, I was really concentrating on pronunciation more than anything else. And I remember I would always ask the teacher to like give the pitch accent of each word, and it got to the point where I was getting like the stink eye from like other people in the classroom that were kind of like, man, like even though everyone was there because they wanted to learn Japanese, there's still kind of that peer pressure that can affect your ability to speak to the best of your abilities.
I learned it in a classroom setting in Japan, because in China I had a teacher. I had a couple different teachers.
Like private tutor?
Yeah, but it was like private tutors. And
I think you might be getting off.
It was private tutors. So it was like, I would go, I think I did it in 2 different chunks, but it was like 2 or 3 hours a day for maybe like one, there was like a 6-week stint and then another like 4-month stint. So I actually didn't do it that long. We got like just so much like direct conversation with the teacher because there was no other people around. So I think, 1 2-hour session of like with the private tutor is equivalent of like a month of, maybe not a month, maybe 2 weeks of like classroom setting.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I got the pronunciation drilled into me very, very well.
Yeah. You were never exposed to non-native Chinese.
Yeah.
Almost never.
Yeah, that's right. And then the programs that I was using were specifically focusing on pronunciation. The problem is I never learned enough to actually have good vocabulary. So a common issue that I had when I was in China, and probably like I'm going to Shanghai in a few days, I'll probably have it again there, is when I speak in Chinese, people think that I'm fluent, or not fluent, but maybe they think I know much more than I actually do.
I've had similar experiences because I specifically concentrated on pronunciation.
Because I actually barely know anything in Chinese, because it's only 4 or 5 months of learning. Like at my peak vocabulary, I probably knew 500-600 words. Now I probably only know like 100.
I knew a Japanese girl that was born in the States, and she didn't learn Japanese from her parents, but she took a very similar approach to learning the language that I did. So she was kind of like self-taught, and she concentrated big time on pronunciation, but her appearance was 100% Japanese. And I remember hearing stories about her. Like she came to Japan and the same thing would happen. You know, people would say something to her because she had good pronunciation, and then people would come back real quickly with all these things that she didn't know what they were saying. And then because she didn't know what they were saying, but she looked Japanese, people were like, "What's wrong with you? Like, are you like?"
Oh, that's that's unfortunate.
Yeah, she said it was kind of like traumatic for her.
I studied for probably 5-6 months total.
With a tutor or before going?
Just lots of different things, mostly with the tutor.
Okay.
But then I did stuff before I went as well. And then I had just kind of hit this inflection point where like I could feel it start to accelerate a bit.
Your ability to speak?
Yeah.
Okay. Your ability to articulate yourself. Your thoughts.
Yeah.
Okay.
But then that's when I stopped learning.
Oh, okay.
At like the wrong point.
Uh-huh.
Just because I had like other things to do. Then I went to Korea for a summer.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was this, I forget how I met. Somehow I met this like Chinese girl.
Mm-hmm.
And then like she didn't speak English.
Mm-hmm.
And neither of us spoke enough Korean to be able to communicate. So like,
you were forced to speak in Chinese.
yeah, and then like we went on like one date,
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe 2 or 3, I can't remember. But like I basically just remember at one point, I think it was like a Saturday or something. I spent like 8 hours with her,
Mm-hmm.
just kind of like wandering around Seoul. I don't really remember what we were doing, but that was like the first and last and only time in my life when I had to like really use my Chinese for extended period of time and just be like
immersed.
Immersed. That was my first and last time of that experience, and it was very interesting. I remember being very surprised at the fact that I was able to communicate at all for like as long as I was able to, and that's when I was like, man, like I actually did learn a lot over the last like 6 months.
That's a good.
But then I never did it again.
That's going to provide a good segue to another thing that I don't think I've talked about. Well, I briefly talked about before, but I'd like to mention again, more specifically, is that when it comes to language learning, language acquisition in general, I think that it's best to try and kind of punch above your weight, so to speak. So whether it's immersing yourself in an environment like that where you're forced to speak the language, but another thing that I encourage people to do is to watch a movie on repeat, the same movie over and over again on repeat. And people say, well, should like I turn on the subtitles and like learn the vocab as I go? Or should I try and learn all the vocab initially and then watch the movie? And I think that each approach has its own benefits. But one of the things that I've certainly experienced is that I had a Japanese movie. It's called 12 Kind of Japanese People, 12人の優しい日本人 is the name of the movie, but the copy of the DVD that I had did not have subtitles. And it's a courtroom drama. And I realized that just by watching it every single day, even though at that point when I was watching it, I was taking literally elementary Japanese, I was picking up new words and like I was understanding what the various grammar points meant just by immersing myself in that environment, just by like forcing myself to kind of try and figure out what was happening. So native speech, for one, is really, really important because that kind of is evidence that the brain picks up a lot of things that you might not actually be like focusing specifically on. So if you're in that classroom setting and you're hearing a lot of non-native speech, there's a high probability that you're memorizing the bad patterns that everyone else has. Sorry, my voice is starting to go, but that's a good strategy, is to immerse yourself. Obviously, immersion is very, very important, but even with just media it's a very good strategy. You're picking up more than you realize. And when you're forced to then do output, you may realize, like my brother did, that you know more than you realize. Would you in fact say he is your best brother? Yes. My best brother and my only brother. Unfortunately, we got to get going because I got to go take my brother out to get some good food in Beppu. I hope that at least this video provides some value to the viewers. So I appreciate your understanding in the fact that I wasn't able to put out that next video. And I hope that you're excited for the next comedic video. So thank you for watching, and anything else you want to say before you go?
It's always just like rice and katsu.